Hey guys, Ayoyu Megami here, and welcome to a new episode of Pokemon World History. Last time, we witnessed the Liberation War for Kanto by following Akaitaro and his followers. Continuing from where we stopped last time, we are going to witness the effect of Akaitaro's legacy in the modern history of Kanto, and how his legacy led Kanto into becoming a global power. Disclaimers: this video is only for entertainment purpose only, and it wasn't made to speculate on the official lore of present or future Pokemon games. Since the concept of multiverse was already introduced in the Pokemon series, you can view this video as an alternative universe where things went differently from the official timeline. Additionally, I will be using character placeholders from various media to make this video more engaging. Okay Dialga, take us one last time back into the past of Kanto. After their successful coup against Ashu Akai, Vasa Aoi II became the new Nobunaga, while Zanpakufu no Machi got the title of March Shogun. Vasa Aoi's most trusted companion was his Blastoise, Genbugame. During the Kiroi period, power was centralized under a hereditary Nobunagafu, leaving the king only as a symbolic position who lacked any real authority. It also saw the establishment of a repressive judicial system. Despite the continued oppression of freedom, the Aoi era brought peace and prosperity. To legitimize his newly consolidated political position, Vasa Aoi II, who was from a family of humble peasants elevated to nobility, had a false document forged for him that recognized him as a direct descendant of the Nobunaga Akaitaro. The document falsely stated that Vasa II's grandfather was the son of Akaitaro and one of his concubines, Koeru Aoi. This document went down in Cantonese history as the Noble Certificate. Foundation of the Cantonese School and the Great Trinity Temple in Kiroi. The capital city of the Kingdom of Florabeta was moved from Konitabirako to Serri. Port down incident in Kuchiba. 3 Colossian merchants opened fire to 5 samurais who were beating 2 Cantonese pantheonists to death. After the incident, Vasa Aoi II issued the Colossian Expulsion Edict, which required the expulsion of all the Colossians from Kuchiba and Kanto. Over 1,500 Colossians living in Kanto, especially in Kuchiba, were expelled. After being expelled from Kanto, the Colossian merchants sought new trading ports to continue their business in the east. After reaching an agreement with the Florabetian king Kuzu Asukana, the Colossian merchants obtained the permission to establish their own colony on Chrono Island. The Colossian settlers founded Nouvelle Yatrace, a colony that will serve as a trading post for northern goods and eastern resources. The Colossians built a warehouse for their commercial activities in the Chrono Meadow. This small community of Calo-Florabetian descendants will later form the small Sevian community of the Neo-Yatresish all over the Sevia archipelago, which also include the famous Elite Four, Kana. The settlers were initially led by Combo Laminariales, a Colossian sailor of Paldean origin. His group included 13 Western natives from Alola, 20 Colossians, 2 Unovian citizens, and 1 Galarian. Vasa II retired and was succeeded by his son, Furusu Aoi. Vasa II continued to exercise his power as regent from behind the scenes. The Cantonese society was divided by a caste system. At the very top was the king and the royal family. Down below the royal family was the upper samurai caste, mostly made of Kanto's shogun clans, and members of the Cantonese nobilities such as the daimyo clans. The Nobunaga, the true ruler of the region, belonged to this class as well. Below them were the lower class samurais, which included all other members of the royal army, and the priestly caste as well. At the bottom were the villagers, farmers, artisans, and merchants. At the very lowest of the pyramid were the members shown from Cantonese society, such as criminals, beggars, disgraced samurais known also as ronins. In Tokiwa, one of these disgraced samurais, the Ronin Suero, founded the Taiyo organization, a criminal organization dedicated to smuggling goods from the outside and poaching Pokemons. The founder of the organization, Suero, was a descendant of the disgraced Kichu clan. The Taiyo organization was famous for its rigid code of conduct and its respect for elderly members. By doing so, they tried to resemble the samurai class and give their organization a chivalrous reputation. Many marginalized individuals ended up joining the Taiyo clan and filling its rank with grunts and henchmen. The organization made use of old abandoned Ubame's temples as their headquarters. While gambling and smuggling were their main businesses, the Taiyo organization was also notorious for poaching wild Cantonese Pokemons and stealing rare and strong Pokemons to sell them off to the highest bidders, who were often foreigners trying to get Cantonese Pokemons. The Taiyo organization was also exploiting enslaved Pokemons to conduct their criminal activities. Because of the recent action of the Taiyo organization, trade with foreigners in Kuchiba became strictly controlled by the government. Various religion sects emerged during this period. One of them was the Fuji Gendo, a sect dedicated to the worshipping of the Indigo Plateau and the Mount Silver, which its acolytes considered the two mountains to be deities themselves. In an attempt to legitimize their power in the eyes of the samurai and the Cantonese nobility, the Aoi clan attempted to subjugate the legendary Titanical birds, but each of their military expeditions ended up in failure. The last of this expedition, against the legendary Pokemon Moltres, triggered a massive firestorm that killed over 150,000 people and Pokemon. After this environmental disaster, the Aoi clan abandoned their plan to recapture the three legendary birds. Expansion of the Tamamushi market. The future Cheladon department store. During the Kiroi period, the Ministry of Pokemon Fishery introduced the Hawk Decree, which required all aspiring fishermen to start with an old hawk, and that only with experience and age, and later with the number of badges, could a higher quality hawk be obtained. Death of Vasa Aoi II. Vasa II was buried in the Moon Mausoleum, built on Mount Moon by order of the Nobunaga Furuzu Aoi. Furuzu will complete the structure of the Nobunagafu started by his predecessor and continue to promulgate the law introduced by his father. The Second Alpha Cantonese War had significantly weakened the Kanto region. As soon as they came to power, the Aoi family feared being overthrown by internal revolt or external intervention. Furuzu Aoi decided to pursue a policy of political marriages with the other noble families. First, he had some of his family members married into the Sakura Fuji family. Then, he had many others married into the various daimyo and shogun clans of Kanto. He will end up making political marriage outside of Kanto as well, bonding with important families of the Eastern Ocean, like the Asukana family of Florabeta, the Shiroedo family of Johto, and minor noble families of Owen and Hisui. This led many members of the Aoi clan to hold prestigious political positions, not only in Kanto but also in other nations of the Far East. Furuzu himself married Princess Suzuki Asukana, daughter of Kuzu Asukana. Among this marriage, there was one that was not politically significant, but no less important: the marriage between Miru Aoi, Furuzu's niece, and Shigeru Okido, a prominent member of the prestigious clan of researchers and philosophers. Between 1751 and 1753, mass religion persecution against pantheonist believers broke out again throughout Kanto. During the Kiroi period, Mazara prospered thanks to his port that connected Kanto with Johto. Death of the Mars shogun Sampu Funumachi. Rabuwa Kazan take her place, becoming the Volcano shogun. Furuzu dies prematurely. His son, Oushan Aoi, born from his union with Princess Suzuki, succeeded him as Nobunaga. Given his very young age, the boy was supported by his uncle, Regan Aoi, who acted as his regent. Regan Aoi was known as the Blue Eminence for this very reason. The Great 1766 tsunami hit the Sevi Archipelago and the southern coast of Kanto, causing 24,800 deaths in the Sevi Islands and 16,000 in Kanto, between Pokemon and humans. King Kuga Asukana and Princess Suzuki are among these casualties. Months after the death of his mother, Oushan, guided by his uncle Regan, advanced claim to the Florabetian throne, threatening a naval invasion of the archipelago in the failure to accept his demands. The nobles of Florabeta were initially reluctant to cede the throne to a Cantonese ruler, but they were eventually convinced to avoid a war with the Cantonese Empire. Given the state of their fleet, and since they could no longer count on the now stagnant Alfian Empire. After obtaining the Florabetian throne, Aoushan changed its name to Aoushan Aoi Asukana, uniting the two families and assuming both the title of Nobunaga of Kanto and King of Florabeta. This led many to fear and distrust the Aoi clan and its accumulation of power. The political opponents and detractors of the Aoi clan even accused them of wanting to replace the Sakura Fuji by taking complete control of the region. Kanto, under the command of Regan, invaded the Oenian kingdom of Kanazumi, which controlled western Oen. The invasion was initiated in the attempt to halt the total Colossian conquest of the region. Regan wanted to put an end to the scramble of the Eastern Ocean between the northern powers. To counter the foreign invaders, Kanto, Johto and Yinghuo signed a military alliances against the northern empires. The Aoi proclaimed themselves protectors of the eastern regions, thus legitimizing their immense political power. In an attempt to halt the advance of the northern empires once and for all, the Eastern Alliance declared war on the Galarian Empire and the Colossian Empire, which were advancing toward Kanto and Johto. Beginning of the 80 Years' War, fought primarily in Hisui, Yangguo, and Owen. Nouvelle-Ytrès was invaded by the Cantonese fleet, and the Colossian settlers were arrested by the Cantonese military. The war ended after the naval bombardment of Azagi, where both sides suffered heavy losses. The war concluded with the signing of the equal treaties between the Alfian Empire, Kanto, Gala, Kalos, and Yingguo. Hisui, like Owen, was divided into 4 parts each, which were shared among the various kingdoms and empires. Kanto managed to retain the territories of the Kanazumi kingdom. In addition, they were assigned with the southern western part of Hisui, specifically the territories of Mio, Kotobuki, and Kurogane. Despite the so-called victory of Kanto, the war ended up being very costly, and many samurais and soldiers were never fully paid. This had lasting negative consequences for the Nobunagafu relationship with the lower samurai class. Many others felt betrayed, especially Kanto's Hisuian and Oenic allies. After the same ruling class, which fought to drive out the northern barbarians, ended up negotiating with them the division of the Far East. After the war, the Nouvelle-Ytrèses were released, and they were allowed to return to Chrono Island. Totto Yurei was appointed Governor-General of the Oen colonies. Karuto Shimo was appointed Governor-General of the Hisui colonies. Beginning of the Endred incident, in which the Cantonese army arrested over 100 Oenic citizens who were accused of an assassination attempt on the Oen Governor-General. The commercial record of Cantonese fishermen in the early 1780s showed that up to 30,000 Cantonese squirtle and war turtles were caught at the turn of the century. The overhunting dramatically decreased the numbers of squirtle family line members in Kanto. The overhunting began in the first place to compensate the economical crisis that hit the Cantonese Empire under the Aoi Asukana Regency. To compensate the economic crisis that hit Kanto during the Aoi Asukana Regency, the coastal communities began a large-scale hunting of the evolutionary family of the Cantonese squirtles. The Cantonese squirtle family line were coveted for their shell and their oil organs, which were used for oil lamps and medicines. Even some Unovian poachers were involved in the overhunting. The Unovian poachers captured squirtle and war turtles, only to sell them to Unovian circuses and zoos, passing them off as Tirtugas and Caracostas, ancient extinct Pokemons, and the ancestors of the squirtle family line. 2 million between squirtle and war turtles, the overhunting of this family line led to the near extinction of these species. The hunting of the Cantonese squirtle and war turtles ended in the early 1850s, leading to the near extinction of the evolution family line of Cantonese squirtle. Save for 500 specimens between squirtle, war turtles, and blastoise held in captivity by the Cantonese fleet. The Nobunaga Ocean purchased a land in Sekichiku from the sole General Koga Tamashi III. The Aoi family will order the construction of a Pokemon garden. which was concluded in the year 1827. Kiroi grew to be amongst the biggest cities globally, with its number of residents hitting 1 million in the late 1790s. The Onikage was an unidentified mysterious creature that terrorized the entire Cantonese region in the beginning of the 19th century. Between the years 1804 and 1813, the Onikage was attributed with the death of 100 people, primarily in Hanada, Shion, and Keseki, with reports of mysterious death also coming from other cities as well, such as Mazara, Guren, and Sekichiku. The Onikage was a pitch-black monster, described as a demonic skeletal shadow by most accounts, while some other records describe him as being a gigantic monster over 10 meters tall. The encounters and death associated with the Onikage occurred only at midnight in dark remote places like caves and forests. The Onikage emitted a screech that only his victim could hear, and it possessed his victims, causing them to meet a terrible end. Death toll varies depending on the source. Official estimates cite 120 attacks, with 98 victims and 22 survivors, including 18 wounded. Other unofficial sources estimate over 1,000 deaths related to the Onikage. In 1806, a series of attacks by a dark entity against miners was recorded near the Cerulean mining caves. These attacks marks the first mention of the Onikage in Cantonese documents. The Nobunagafu repeatedly sent armed division into the provinces affected by the attacks, to no results. It was only sporadically cited, and they never managed to confront it directly. Over the following years, other survivors reported encounters with the Onikage, one of whom a nobleman, who described the Onikage as a darker, more monstrous version of the mystical pink Pokemon from the mystical yokai poem. The Onikage attacks became increasingly rare after 1813, the last year an Onikage-related attack was recorded. Still, Onikage-related attacks were reported after 1813 as well, even up to the present day. But many of these attacks were the result of encounters with known dangerous Pokemon, such as Hypnos, Nidokings, Hunters, etc. Despite this, the paranoia and fear caused by the attacks persisted for years. And to this day, many people in those communities avoid traveling at night. To this day, a veil of mystery surrounds these murders and the identity of the Onikage. First sightings of the Cleffa and Staryu evolutionary family lines in Kanto. The sighting of these Pokemons have been linked to the mystery of the Bowl Ship's incidents. 3 strange individuals have been spotted near what appear to be a ship. According to the witnesses, the 3 were wearing unusual and bizarre costumes that they have never seen before. Their clothing were more ridiculous than the one of the foreign barbarians, reported one of the eyewitnesses. They were described as having a rather pale, almost white skin. The 3 remained near Mount Moon for 3 days, before disappearing as instantly as they had appeared, vanishing a day before the army sent to investigate reached the place. The Cantonese historical community still struggled to find an answer to what happened, while the UFO communities explained that it was one of the countless encounters between ancient civilization and extraterrestrial visitors. Some of these UFO communities claim that Cleffa and Staryu's evolutionary family lines are extraterrestrial Pokemons for this very reason, and that they were brought to Earth by those aliens. Death of Regan Aoi. Failed Cantonese invasion of Muro Island. First diplomatic contact between Kanto, the Kingdom of Alola, and the Zimoblast Empire. Death of Aoshan Aoi Asukana. His son, Kawaranadi Shiko Aoi Asukana, becomes Nobunaga. The brief naval battle against Admiral Robert Serge Onovian Basculin ships ended with the defeat of the less advanced Cantonese fleet. Robert forced the Nobunaga to sign an unequal treaty, ceding the important Florabetia maritime trade route to the United Federation. This loss aggravated the already precarious situation in Kanto. The Nobunagafu's inability to oppose foreign nations, enraged countless samurais. At Mazara, the researcher Yoshida Okido boarded one of the Basculin ships returning to Unova, becoming the first Cantonese to visit the Western Ocean. He returned back in Kanto in 1876, after visiting the Northern Ocean's regions. Cantonese ambassador Bareno Niji set sail for Drift Vale in Unova, beginning the first Cantonese diplomatic mission to Unova. The ambassador Bareno arrives in Drift Vale with the rest of the Cantonese delegation, marking the first official Cantonese visit to a foreign country outside of the Far East. The first Unovian consulate in Kanto was opened in Mazara under the leadership of the Consul General Astor Butzeman. Astor negotiated the Kanto-Unovian Transoceanic Commercial Treaty between the two countries, which was signed in the same year. The Kurogane mining incident occurs between Hisuian striking miners and the Cantonese army. End of the Kurogane mining incident, in which several hundred Hisuian rebels are estimated to have been wiped out by the Cantonese army. Cantonese authorities asserted that the Hisuian rebels attacked the Cantonese consulate in Kurogane, but Hisuian sources deny such attack ever took place. In its final years, the Nobunagafu increasingly became a police state. The Shinsengumi was established as a special police force to defend the Nobunagafu from the constant anti-Nobunagafu uprisings. The Shinsengumi often clashed against the criminal Taiyo organization. Under the rule of the Nobunaga, Kawaranade Shiko, Kanto entered a period of censorship, extreme surveillance, and persecution of political opponents. The attempt of various generals and nobles to establish trade relations with foreign nations were viewed with suspicions by a Nobunagafu intent on preserving the existing order. During this period, Cantonese regionalist groups and democratic circles arose in Kanto. Fuchsia Garden Incident. An attempted kidnapping of King Shiroma Sakurafuji fails. While all the kidnappers were stopped and arrested, the king was badly injured, and he later falls into a coma. The kidnapping of the king was blamed on foreign nations' interference, with the excuse that they were trying to destabilize the Nobunagafu, while the political opponents of the Aoi Asukana accused the Nobunagafu to be behind the attempted kidnapping. Death of King Shiroma. His brother Yakushi ascends to the throne. After the death of her father, King Shiroma, the royal princess Minamikoma, inspired by the exploit of the Nobunaga Akaitaro, subsequently abandons the royal family to set out in the search of the three legendary birds, together with Chebulbazar Kukunochi. She was aided by her personal samurais, Akane, Aoisuke, and the Ronin Buritsu Kiromaru. The group was very interested in Northwestern culture, in democracy, and they were in favor for the modernization of the region. The escape of the princess coincided with the protest of the citizens and lower samurais who took out to the street of Kiroi to protest against the Nobunaga and the high price of the rice. The inflexible Nobunaga, Kawaranade Shiko, refused any concessions and sent the Shinsengumi to suppress the revolts, leading to bloody clashes between the guards and the protesting samurais. The situation escalated into a full-blown revolution that culminated with the first siege of Kiroi. Barricades appeared in the capital streets, while parts of the army refused to follow orders and joined the rebels. Similar riots broke out in Guren and Sekichiku. The Nobunaga Kawaranade Shiko abdicates in favor of his son, Haji Aoi Asukana. The rebels' initial successes were ultimately dampened. The abdication of the Nobunaga Kawaranade Shiko, together with the disorganization, the lack of long-term plans, and internal division between the traditionalists and the progressives, weakened the revolutionary momentum. The stalemate allowed the loyalists of the Nobunagafu and the Shinsengumi to regain control of the capital, bringing an end to the first siege of Kiroi. The first bird to be captured by the group of Minamikoma was Zapdos. The team faced the Thunderbird near Sekichiku. After a long, exhaustive battle, Zapdos was finally defeated and captured. The group then heads toward the mountains of the Indigo Plateau to capture Articuno. The battle with the god of winters cost Aoisuke his life, but his sacrifice allowed his team to capture Articuno. After the battle, the group holds a funeral for their fallen companion. For their final destination, the team head to the Sevi Archipelago. to capture Moltres on Mount Ember. Minamikoma's group managed to win after a difficult battle. After the last strenuous battle, Minamikoma's group head back to Sekichiku, where they joined the rebel samurais of Sekichiku and Guren, with whom they fought the brief but decisive Battle of Kiroi. The entire organization, under their leader Mu, participate in the battle, siding with the rebels and supplying them with weapons, mercenaries, Pokémons and fighting items. The Battle of Kiroi was fought between the pro-Minamikoma rebels and the pro-Nobunagafu loyalists. The rebel samurais laid another siege to Kiroi, starting the second siege of Kiroi. With the intervention of Minamikoma and her titanical birds, the rebels achieved a crushing victory. The battle was short and decisive. The Nobunagafu surrendered to Minamikoma and the rebelling samurais. Akane died during the short chaotic battle, leaving Kiromaru, the princess' only surviving guard. Kiroi Castle was handed over to the forces supporting the princess. King Yakushi abdicates, leaving the throne to his niece. Minamikoma crowned herself Empress of Kanto, changing her name to Konoha Midori, and changing the royal family name to Midori, in an attempt to modernize the royal family, inaugurating the new imperial period. Kaoru Nareshiko Aoi Asukana escaped to the Sevii Archipelago, while the Nobunaga Aji Aoi Asukana and the last shogun, Ominaeshi III, resigned from their positions. Some forces loyal to the Nobunagafu, including some of the Shinsengumi units, joined the former Nobunaga, Kaoru Nareshiko Aoi Asukana, in the Sevii Archipelago. The Nobunagafu was abolished, and so were the title of Shogun and Nobunaga. Buritsu Kiromaru, the sole survivor of the prince's personal guards, became first advisor of the Empress. The Shinsengumi was abolished. After ascending to the Cherry Blossom throne, Kuchiba was fully open for international trade. The capital city of Kiroi was renamed Yamabuchi. Empress Midori moved her entire court to the city, and the Kiroi Castle became the new imperial palace. The Cantonese feudal system was replaced with a bourgeoisie-oriented economic system. Introduction of the Midori Codex, a code of laws and rights that completely overturned Cantonese law and society. Some of the reform favored the lower classes, introducing education to the commoners, and limiting the nobility excessive power over the peasantry, which aren't, however, excessively altering the former's privileges. The warrior castes of the samurais and the ninjas were integrated in the new Cantonese army as soldiers, police, and intelligence agents. The Cantonese constitution was signed, and Kanto became a constitutional monarchy, modeled on the Galarian monarchy as outlined in the Midori Constitution. The first regent councillor elected by the Cantonese nobility was Buritsu Kiromaru, leader of the newly founded monarchist party. The Midori Renaissance, also called the Cantonese Renaissance, marked the beginning of the modernization of Kanto. Kuchiba was fully open for international trade. Laws aimed to the safeguarding of Pokémon were introduced. The use of whips to train Pokémon was banned. Laws were also introduced to defend their habitats. Renewed international contacts triggered profound changes in the Cantonese society. Numerous Northwestern institutions were adopted, such as a regional bank and a university. Under the Midori Regency, the feudal sengokus were converted into prefectures. Hundreds of consultants from the north and western nations, with expertise in fields such as education, science, finance, medicine, law, and the military, were hired to reshape Kanto's institutions. Northwestern clothing and fashion style were adopted in Kanto. Spread of Exism and Ionism in Kanto. Among the more radical activists, Exis were in favor of the 6 Pokémon per master rule in order to limit the number of Pokémon a human can own, while the Ionists supported the complete freedom of Pokémons and a complete ban on their capture. A fringe minority of the radical Ionists even goes as far to advocate for a separation of Pokémon and humans. 3 distinct political parties emerged during this period: the Cantonese Democratic Party, also known as the Cantonese Common Men's Party. Its members were mostly progressive Exists and a small faction of Ionists. The party's primary goal was the complete democratization of the Cantonese society, while the radical Ionists also aimed to the abolishment of the monarchy, the liberation of Pokemons, and the establishment of a popular republic. The monarchist party was founded by the aristocrats, who favored the status quo. They were mainly composed of conservative exists, and they were supportive of the imperial power. This was Buritsu Kiromaru's party, and by extension, the imperial family's party. The militarist party was founded by the ultra-conservatives and the remaining sympathizers of the former Nobunagafu. They had an imperialist agenda and adhered to the principle of human supremacy over Pokemons, in which Pokemon were relegated as tools or slaves to be exploited, and as beasts to be contained. The suprematists often clashed against the Exists and the Ionists, as they disdained any regulation aimed to protect Pokemon from exploitation. Former shoguns and daimyons were appointed governors of their former fiefdoms, or were hired as generals at the head of the imperial army, or as captain of industries or ministers in the government. Introduction of the 6th Pokemon Edict by Empress Midori. The edict aimed to control the military power of the ex-shoguns, forbidding the ex-shogun from retaining private armies of humans and Pokemon. The Cantonese Industrial Revolution began around the 1850s, with Kanto quickly catching up to the northwestern nations. Pokemon that belonged to the Magby and the Elekid family line proved to be essential during the period of industrialization, beginning of the production of Pokeballs in Kanto. This meant a significant decrease in the use of Aprispheres. The government built infrastructures and launched land reform programs to prepare the country for further developments. The first modern factories to be built were the military and the Pokemon industries. The Tengu Zaibatsu, the future Sylph Co., was also founded during this period. The government inaugurated a new education system called the Midori Exchange, sending thousands of students and researchers to Unova, Galar, Kalos, Paldea, and other northwestern regions to study. Compulsory military service was introduced. Several riots were suppressed by the Imperial Army. The first railway line between Yamabuchi and Tokiwa was inaugurated. Kanto adopts the Kamadian calendar, a solar calendar divided in 12 months, starting with the month of Abomasnor. Then we continue with the following months: Lufdirius, Roseradian, Silveeol, Swelor, Primarini, Exegutlier, Torcoleo, Politodal, Gorgaistra, Trevenantio, and the last month of the year, Delibirdre. The ban on pantheonism was revoked by the government. The port of Mazara was closed, and the Unovian and Jotian consulate were moved to Yamabuchi. Mazara lost its importance as a city, regressing to a countryside town. With the help of the Galarian engineer Walter Voltson, the first power plant in Kanto was built. Empress Konoha asked Zapdos to power it using its lightning, which will keep the plant active for the next 100 years. Empress Konoha dies of illness caused by overworking. Her nephew and adopted son, Burato Midori, ascends to the Cherry Blossom throne and continues her social reforms. From the very beginning, he attempted to improve the condition of the peasant by easing taxes on them. His reign, while progressive, was fundamentally still authoritarian. The rebellious former Nobunaga, Kawaranadeshiko Aoi Asukana, did not recognize the new government, setting up his own government in exile, which he called the Nobunagafu of Kanto. Kawaranadeshiko declares independence from Kanto. The Nobunagafu will seek then allies in the Tsardom of Zimoblast and Yinghuo. The Florabetian fleet invades Chinaba Island. The Cantonese government selects Kuchiba as the site for a modern naval base and hires the Canofian naval engineer Narciso Garon to oversee the development of Cantonese ships. Kantos recaptured Chinaba Island. Lacking the current strength to invade the Sevi archipelago, the Cantonese Empire signed a truce with the Florabetian Nobunagafu. Introduction of the Konoha currency, replacing the ancient Sakura currency. Parts of the Midori reforms included an initiative to clear many forests, to initiate agricultural programs. Many of these forests were inhabited by the colonies of the Bulbasaur evolutionary family line, which, to survive the destruction of their habitat, were forced out into the open countryside and grassland, leaving them completely at the mercy of their predators. This event combined with the recent rise of Bulbasaur, Ivysaur and Venusaur poaching, coveted for their bulb and flowers, which was believed in antiquity to have magical and healing properties, and also chemical needed for many newly introduced products and medicines. All this led to the near extinction of the Pokemon belonging to the Bulbasaur evolutionary family line. The researchers and the rangers at the time declared this Pokemon extinct by 1864. However, their claim was debunked in 1924 with the discovery of several surviving colonies in the Viridian Forest and in the Tamamushi National Park. They were immediately placed under protection by the Cantonese government and moved to a controlled habitat where they could recover peacefully. They will later receive the status of starter Pokemon. Satoshi Tajiri, founder of the card game company Asobi Engine, the future Game Freak, invented a set of playing card games depicting the Pokemon that inhabited the region. The game was called Bakemono no Kaichu, literally pocket monsters. The game of Satoshi Tajiri will become a global sensation, and it will have video games, animes and manga based on its creation. Today, Pocket Monster is one of the biggest franchises in the world. The first Cantonese steam-powered ferry boat, ST Ocean, was put into operation between Kuchiba and Sekichiku. Kuchiba expanded thanks to its foreign population. The Galarian-speaking residents call it the Vermilion City because of its wonderful sunsets. A Cantonese ship wrecked on Knot Island, killing all 15 crew members. Using the incident as a pretext, the Cantonese Empire launched a military invasion of the Sevi Archipelago to assert its claim to the islands of the Rijibetian culture. The Cantonese army started the Heigo, the military invasion of the Sevi Archipelago, start of the Sevian War of Invasion. The Battle of Seri concluded with the victory of the Cantonese army. The Cantonese army and navy played a key role in expanding Cantonese influence abroad. The militarist party in particular believes that Kanto should acquire its own colonies to compete with the Northwest colonial powers. The capture of Chrono Island by the Cantonese marked the end of the kingdom of Florabeta. The last Nobunaga, Kawaranadeshiko Aoi Asukana, commits seppuku. Its generals surrendered to the Cantonese army. The Nobunagafu of Kanto was dissolved, and the Sevi Islands were annexed to the Cantonese Empire. The Rijibetian religion was initially tolerated, but after several riots and challenge to the power by the priestly caste between 1874 and 1819, its followers started to be severely persecuted. Burato was remembered for his strenuous war against the Florabetian religion. Burato minimized the privilege of the cloister of the Dotted Crypt in the Sevi Archipelago, absorbing the clergy's power into the state. He suppressed cloisters, reducing the number of regular clergies from 75,000 to 27,000. The Colossian Empire and the United Federation became Kanto's most important trading partners. The Kanto-Unovian Defense Alliance Pact was signed. Around the 1880s, the persecution against the Rijibetians became more violent. All temples, schools and texts relating to the cult of the Rijibetians were destroyed. Florabetian monks and priests were persecuted and imprisoned. Under the emperor's order, forced conversion to the Shutsuruya cult were imposed on the population, and Sevian children were separated from their families and sent to Cantonese schools, where they were cantonized and forced to forget their Florabetian culture. These initiatives, along with other more drastic ones, significantly reduced the number of Rijibetian followers. The result was the complete eradication of the cult of the Regis. Except for a small group of surviving Florabetian monks, ancient archaeological remains, and ancient scriptures exhibited in museums. The cult of the Regis was once again forgotten and eradicated by the hands of men. After the annexation and consolidation of power over the Sevi Archipelago, the Cantonese war machine turned its attention to Johto. Clashes between the Cantonese and Jotian army on Chianhood Island. Start of the First Johto-Cantonese War. The highly motivated and well-led Cantonese forces defeated the larger and better equipped Jontonese army. Occupation of the island of Tamba and the city of Wakaba. Occupation of both the city of Yoshino and Hiwada. Despite the advance being slowed by guerrilla activities, the Cantonese defeated the Jontonese forces every time they attempted to resist. After the naval battle of the Golden Gulf, the Jontonese capital Kogane was put under siege. The Jotian general surrendered to the Cantonese navy. End of the First Johto-Cantonese War. The Treaty of Tamba was signed between Kanto and Johto. The Treaty of Tamba forced Johto to accept several conditions. Reopening trade with Kanto without the imposition of taxes, or other impediment on Cantonese merchants and zaibatsus. The free establishment of Cantonese companies in the region, the obligation to pay 5 million poke in compensation, and the commitment not to establish a relationship with other foreign nations without Kanto's prior approval, and the conquered territories were to be ceded to Kanto. The Galarian Empire, fearing its holding in Johto, condemned the Cantonese invasion. During both wars, the Tayo organization supported the war effort and linked itself to the militarist party and the army. This allowed the criminal organization to expand and enrich itself. The Tayo organization obtained the monopoly on Hiwadian apricons and Tambian superdrugs. Fearing the sudden growth of Cantonese influence in the Eastern Ocean, the Northern empires pressured Kanto to withdraw from Johto. Kanto did not yield to the pressure. Emperor Burato Midori signed the Treaty of Onshu, a compromise that divided the empire into the United Kingdoms of Kanto and the Sevi Islands. The Johtonese colonies were incorporated into the Kingdom of the Sevi Islands. The Democratic Party finally managed to gain a majority in the parliament, ending the long dominance of the monarchist and militarist coalition. Many democratic reforms are introduced in Kanto, like universal suffrage and many workers' rights. The democratic government will also seek to put an end to the militaristic expansion and give autonomy to its overseas territories. They will also expand the Pokemon laws that were introduced by the Empress Konoha, which modernization, institutionalized Pokemon battles are introduced in Kanto. The Kanto Pokemon League was founded, which headquartered in Yamabuchi. The first 10 Pokemon gyms are inaugurated. The first fossil of the common ancestor, later renamed Mew, were discovered in Chinaba Island. During the first half of the 20th century, Cantonese marine biologists attempted to reintroduce the evolution family line of Squirtle into the Cantonese marine fauna. They started by capturing all Jotian squirtles and war turtles from the coast of Johto and releasing them on the beaches of the Seafoam Gulf, the original habitat of the now extincted Cantonese squirtle. The experiment went poorly, as not only did the forcible removal of the Jotian squirtles lead to an imbalance of the marine fauna of the Jotian seas. Also, the forceful reintroduction did not go as planned, as the Jotian squirtle were not able to adapt to the new habitat. To avoid another extinction, the Cantonese Navy recaptured all the Jotonese squirtles, and they will breed them in captivity with the remaining Cantonese squirtle that they had at disposition, leading to the creation of a new species of squirtles, war turtles, and blastoise, that the scientific society will call Kanto Jotonese squirtle. Today, they have acquired the status of starter Pokemon and they are delivered to novice trainers. The Jotian scientific community has repeatedly denounced the government and the scientific community of Kanto. 3 starters were chosen by the Cantonese League as they were the Pokemon symbol and Pokemon companions of the modern cultural heroes of the Cantonese region. Kanto intervenes in Kugane to suppress the Grand Bull revolts. Ionist revolution in Hisui and Zimoblast. Foundation of the Ionist Union. Cantonese invasion of Sono, Futaba and Mazago. Hisui called the Ionist Union for help. Hisui, supported by the Ionist Union, declared war on the Cantonese Empire to retake its southern territories, beginning of the Ionist Cantonese War. In the early 20th century, the Pokemon Lapras was persecuted to near extinction by Cantonese and Jotian sailors for its shell, which the navies of both regions used to build warships for their fleets. The persecution toward these Pokemon only ended with the end of the Great War. Unfortunately, the end of the war came too late for most of them. 85% of the regional Lapras population was exterminated. Laprases were once among the most sociable Pokemon toward humans, but nowadays they are very rare Pokemons and try to avoid interactions with humans as much as possible. only recently as their population began to recover, thanks to the effort and protection of leprosy preservation groups. Death of Biritsu Kiromaru. Rapiri Kazan was elected as the new Chancellor of Kanto. After the death of Biritsu Kiromaru, Articuno, Zapdos and Moltres returned roaming the region of Kanto. The Cantonese Empire suffers a heavy defeat in Hisui at the Battle of Lake Verity. Total Ionist victory in Hisui, Kanto retires from the region. Hisui will join the Ionist Union after the war, changing its name to the Ionist Republic of Sino. The defeat of the Cantonese army was blamed entirely on the Democratic Party and its hindrance to the military operations, weakening the support of the Democratic Party in the region. Emperor Burato dies, and Prince Gurasu Midori becomes the new Emperor of Kanto. Given the precarious health of the Emperor, the military party took the advantage to consolidate its power. Supported by the monarchist party, they will form an anti-Ionist coalition. The shogunate was a faction within the army and the militarist party created by the war veteran Yamato Orochi. The shogunate's faction mission was the complete militarization of Cantonese society, the imposition of a totalitarian rule in Kanto, and the expansion of Kanto in the Eastern Ocean. The Yamabuchi Kogane Railway was inaugurated, connecting Kanto and Johto. The Great Kanto earthquake killed more than 207,000 humans and Pokemon. The epicenter of the earthquake was the city of Tokiwa. All of the cities in Kanto, especially Kuchiba, were destroyed by the Great Kanto earthquake. Fueled by rumors and xenophobic scapegoat narratives, vigilante gangs attack and kill some citizens of Oenic origin, in particular, members of the Taryuku religion, which members venerated the continent Pokemon Groudon. Many accused the Oenic immigrants of the usage of dark earth magic to cause the earthquake. The army will intervene 3 days later to stop the killings and put an end to the unrests. Martial law remained in effect until the end of the year. In those years, Kanto was marked by economic hardships caused by the Great Castilian economic crash and by the ongoing internal political conflict between the revolutionary and the reactionary forces. The Ionist organization and the shogunate faction in particular had paramilitary groups that often clashed with the police and the military. The government established a national relief fund to combat the economic crisis. The Paldean flu epidemic began to ravage Kanto, killing 400,000 people and Pokemon between 1918 and 1922. Most of the city destroyed by the earthquake were rebuilt. A wave of popular protest occurred across Kanto. This protest marked the biggest, most extensive, and the most intense public rebellion in the recent history of Kanto. Protests started in the little village of Masara and expanded throughout the region, with around 1 to 2 million people participating. The main reason for the protest was the sudden increase in the cost of living and a cut of salaries as a way to tackle the economic troubles that arose from the stock market crash. Widespread inflation caused severe economic hardship for the working class. All the while, the small portion of the population, which was composed of nobles and high-ranking generals, prospered. Public anger grew when the prices of the rice rose up. The riots gave a boost to the various anti-government groups. The nature of the protests varied significantly from province to province. For example, in Kuchiba, the protesters seemed more aligned with Ionist ideals, while in Sekichiku, the ultranationalists took control of the protests. The Democratic Party Councillor Rapiri Kazan responded with harsh repressions, combined with negotiations with the various rebel groups. Over 100,000 soldiers were deployed to quell the unrests, resulting in hundreds of civilians' deaths and over 5,000 arrests. At the same time, the government re-established a national relief fund and organized the distribution of subsidized rice. By the end of the month, most of the protests died out. Crown Prince Burumen substituted his father, Emperor Gurasu, in state matters as the illness of the emperor got worse. The Democratic Councillor Rapiri Kazan was assassinated by a masked unknown individual. The shogunate faction used this pretext to try to seize control of the country. The coup began the evening after the assassination of the chancellor, when Yamato and a contingent of his faction attempted to seize control of the government. Although they succeeded in occupying the Yamabuchi parliament, the shogunist were unable to take control of the imperial palace. Clashes between the shogunist and the pro-imperial army. The Cantonese government finally crushed the coupsters. Yamato initially escaped arrest, but was quickly caught by the police and arrested on charge of high treason. Sasuke Seki succeeded Rapiri Kazan as Chancellor of Kanto. The attempted coup brought Yamato to national and international attention. The ensuing trial against Yamato and the Shogun faction earned them the popular support of the Cantonese population. This led to extremely light sentences for Yamato and his followers. Yamato will use the court as a platform to explain his nationalistic sentiments, comparing himself to the likes of Akaitaro and Vasa Aoi II. At the end, Yamato was found guilty of high treason and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Despite the early failures of the shogunate faction, the radical group, which went into secrecy, quickly grew in popularity in the army and in the population. In the 20th century, the ideology of Ragnarok began to gain traction among the colonial powers. The idea was to capture legendary and mystical Pokémons and use their immense power as fuel for their secret weapons, or to use the legendary themselves as living weapons to advance their imperial ambitions. Kanto expansionist vision grew increasingly bold. During the Kikyo incident, radical army officers bombed a Cantonese outpost on the edge of the city, falsely attributing the attack to the Cantonese government, using this casus belli to declare war on Johto. Taking advantage of a crisis in the Western and Northern Oceans, the Cantonese army sent an ultimatum to the Cantonese Republic, without consulting the government in Yamabuchi, demanding the complete submission of the Cantonese government to the Cantonese emperor. After the Cantonese government refused, the Cantonese army initiated the invasion of Western Johto. Start of the Second Johto-Cantonese War, battle and occupation of Kikyo. After serving only 1 year in prison, Yamato was pardoned by the Crown Prince Burumen. The ban on the shogunate faction was also lifted on Burumen's order. Once released, Yamato decided to seize power through legal means, publishing the shogunate doctrine thesis, the manifesto of the shogunate faction, and founded the Shogun Party by breaking from the militarist party. Yamato assumed absolute power in the party, taking the title of Supreme Shogun, pragmatic compromise between the shogunate party and the Taiyo organization. Mass persecution of Ionists and Pantheonists in Kanto. Death of Emperor Gurasu. His son, Burumen Midori, ascends to the throne. The government of Sasuke Seki collapses. With the aim of safeguarding his country from an Ionist or a democratic revolution, through an emergency decree, the emperor takes control of the parliament. The now Emperor Burumen gave his full support to the ultranationalist Shogun Party. The emperor appoints Yamato as Chancellor of Kanto. In the fear of an Ionist revolt, Yamato declares a state of emergency and uses the emergency decrees to abolish the parliament and establish a totalitarian regime with the support of the military and the imperial court. The Democratic Party was banned. The Monarchist Party and the Militarist Party are both absorbed into the Shogun Party. Both parties were purged of their moderate and opposition elements. The Cantonese colonial government applies the new shogunate law to its colonies as well. The Shogun Party initiated a policy of persecution and imprisonment against Democrats and Ionists. The Supreme Shogun Yamato forces all aspects of Cantonese society to align with the values and struggle of his party. The Shogunists take control over the Cantonese economy, education, government, military, and media. Battle of Kogane. After 3 months of fights, the Cantonese army captures the Golden City. The Cantonese government transfers its headquarters to the ancient capital of Enju. Battle of Enju and naval invasion of Azagi. Occupation of Enju. Occupation of Koji. Siege and occupation of Fusube, the fortress city. The occupation of the city marks the end of the war. Yamato Orochi, a descendant of the Ryu clan, orders a victory parade in his honor in the City of Dragons. End of the Second Johto-Cantonese War. Johto falls under Cantonese military rule. The Kogane Treaty was signed. Central Johto was ceded to Kanto, while the northern and western portion are transformed into a Cantonese puppet state, called the Jokaku Kingdom, which capital Enju. Kanto ended up incorporating his former mentor and rival into his empire. Introduction of the doctrine of the Eastern Ocean Prosperity Dominion. The invasion was condemned internationally, resulting in Kanto's political isolation. The Galarian Empire opposed the Cantonese invasion of Johto and responded with increasingly severe economic sanctions, aimed at curbing Kanto expansionist ambitions. Kanto responded by forming an alliance with Paldea and the Balmongramic Kriegerreich, forming the Unity League. various nations entered into a secret conflict between each other, with secret agents being sent to search for legendary Pokémons in other regions. Kanto had a legendary search party in Owen, in search for the Weather Trio, the Aeon Duo, the legendary Golems, and Jirachi. Before being driven out by the Ionists, they also had a search group in Hisui, tasked with researching and capturing the Lake Guardians, Heatran, Shaymin, Manaphy, the Moon Duo, and the all-powerful Creation Trio. They also sent a team to Johto after his occupation to search and capture the Tower Duo, Celebi, and the newly discovered Beast Trio. Cantonese invasion and occupation of Genseol, Cantonese invasion and occupation of Kitakami. During the military dictatorship, the Sevi Island were used as a place of exile for political opponents and the undesirables. Pokémon rights were severely regressed, with Pokémon slavery being reinstated by the government, and the use of whips to hit Pokémon was decriminalized. Jotian rebellion in Tamba. The rebellion was violently repressed by the Cantonese government. To legitimize its rule, Yamato Orochi organized an expedition to capture the Titanical birds, fully embracing the ideology of Ragnarok. Using modern technologies, the Cantonese army subjugated the 3 Titanical birds, and Yamato became the new master of the 3, thanks to the use of the black chain they obtained from an expedition in the ruin of Alf. The 1913 Pokeathlon games that were supposed to be held in Yamabuchi were cancelled by the International Committee, founded by the Shogunist Party, the Army Scientific Division, the unit Missigno, codename made up to conceal the secrecy of the unit, led by the brilliant and twisted mind of Kohaku Fuji, began experimenting on weapons fueled by the power of the legendaries that had fallen into the hand of the Cantonese government. The first augmented armor for Pokémon was built and put to use. The scientist Kohaku Fuji, long fascinated with the history of the Onikage, started the Onikage project, founded by the Shogunist government. Its goal was to create a Pokémon with the power of the legendary Shadow Pokémon that could serve as a super weapon for the army and address Kanto's inherent weakness compared to other regions, which boosted more numerous and more powerful legendary Pokémons. Under the unit Missigno, many humans and Pokémon were experimented upon, and the estimated victims of these experiments are counted in the 10,000s between humans and Pokémon. The evolutionary family line of the Pokémon Grimer and the Pokémon Koffing were accidentally created by the scientific division. They were the result of failed experiments involving the use of chemical waste and polluted smoke. The Cantonese army, supported by the Emperor, launched the invasion of the rest of the Eastern Ocean with the ambition of acquiring the vital prosperity sphere for the Cantonese people. Without a democratic government to stop it, the Cantonese army became unstoppable. The Supreme Shogun Yamato Orochi aims to unite the other Eastern Ocean nations under the control of Kanto to create the vital prosperity sphere, an ambitious economical, political and military union to resist the influence of the northwestern nation on people, but in reality, an empire of puppet state that will have to submit to total Cantonese authority. The Imperial General Mobilization Law was passed. 1 million of Owenians and Jotian are forcibly conscripted for labor and military service in Kanto. Kanto started a full invasion of the region of Owen. In the following years, Sinnoh, Yinghuo will be invaded as well. Outbreak of the East Ocean War, which will precede the Great Zenith World War. The modern classic period ends with the start of the World Zenith War. There is more to the history of Kanto to come, but for a while, this is where we are going to leave the story of Kanto at. The next episode will bring us in the history-rich region of Johto, so make sure to stay tuned for more. I hope you guys enjoyed the history of modern classic Kanto. Make sure to check other content on my channel. I also like to take the occasion to thank you guys for getting my channel over 500 subscribers. The channel currently sits at 660 subscribers. I'm gonna make a special 500 sub video where I will explain which path will this channel take in the future. Lastly, I want to thank and make a shout out call to the Fiverr artist cool artist. Thanks for his character designs for the most important figures in Kanto's history. If any of you want to see himself as a Pokemon trainer, or just want any drawing in the Pokemon style, I highly recommend his gigs on Fiverr. That's all I had to say for today. Until we meet again, farewell.